4 or 5 minutes ago. So I had asked you a couple of things last time, which were sort of related to, but not quite what we are doing here. And one of them was to find that equation of that loxodromic curve. Did any of you try that? No, doesn't look like. That was one thing. And the other thing I'd asked you to think about is what is the phase portrait of a pendulum? At least someone knows what the phase portrait of a pendulum is. So if you don't know what the phase portrait of a pendulum is, then it's very unlikely that you would know what the phase portrait of a damped pendulum should be. Okay, and these are related to the kind of curves that we're talking about. So point here also is that a lot of these curves, a lot of these things we're talking about actually occur very naturally in a lot of physical setups. Okay, there's one more comment kind of thing I wanted to make was that, you know, there are these 3 courses as such that you are attending, or 3 different people are talking to you about 3 presumably different subjects. Okay, and you must start thinking about how are the topics that you're coming across in each of the other subjects, how they're related to the other 2 subjects series of lectures that you're attending. For example, in one thing with connections between here and the topology course would be that you're learning about categories in topology. What will be the category of holomorphic functions? What are the objects? What are the morphisms? Anyone thought about this? Is there a category of holomorphic functions on domains omega contained in C? What do you think are objects, and what do you think are morphisms? So you've learnt about categories in that particular thing in the previous lecture, and you're learning about holomorphic functions here. Is there a category of holomorphic functions? I mean, is there a holomorphic category? I shouldn't say functions. Is there a holomorphic category? And what are those objects, and what are the morphisms that you should have in the holomorphic category? Any ideas?
Yes, sir.
What?
Yeah, just now I'm thinking objects should be open sets in C, and morphisms are holomorphic maps from one of the
Very good. So something like this should be there, whether you take open sets or you take simply connected regions, or you take any open set or whatever. Those should be the objects, and the morphism should be holomorphic functions. Okay, on that set. Okay, to something else. The morphism between 2 objects should be holomorphic functions. The question will be, what are these universal objects? In your topology class, you're talking about universal objects in a category, okay? Or the final object or the initial object in a category. And the question is, what should the initial object or final object in this category be? Okay? And if you start thinking about it, there are actually quite interesting questions that are there. Okay. Similarly, in your algebra class, okay, you are talking about group actions. Okay. Action of a group G on a set X and various things with that. Okay. In this class, which is the group action On what have you seen already? So in this class, also we are talking about a group action on a set. What is the group and what is the set?
Sir, I think group is set of all Mobius transformations and
Very good.
acting
Set
on
is?
set complex plane or open sets as they
Yeah,
are.
I mean, one has to be slightly careful there because you also want to have infinity, okay? Because the Mobius transformation may map something to infinity, okay? So C union infinity is a set, very good. And the group is Mobius transformations, and the group of Mobius transformation acts on the set on this. You can think about it as a stereographic, you can think about it as a Riemann sphere. So the set is the Riemann sphere, and the group is the group of all Mobius transformations. Okay, and of course there's some normalization that is needed there. And what else did you talk about in your group theory business? You have a group acting on a set, and you talked about the
Orbits and stabilizers.
orbit and the stabilizers. Okay. So the question you have to ask yourself is what? The group is the Mobius group, Mobius transformations, and the set is the stereographic, is the Riemann sphere. Then the question you want to ask yourself is what are the, yes?
Given a means given an Mobius map, what is its stabilizer, or given an region, what is its stabilizer, something.
Or given an element in your set X, which is the stereograph, which is the Riemann sphere, what is the orbit of that point under either the whole group's Mobius group, or what is the orbit under some subgroups?
Orbit
Okay.
is whole sphere.
Orbit is the whole sphere when you consider the whole of the Mobius group, Mobius transformations. And then if you look at subgroups of the Mobius group, what are the orbits for these subgroups? The whole point here is that each of these topics that you're learning in different contexts, okay, each of those topics, you should begin to ask the questions of what do these things mean in a different context. Okay, group acting on a set, and you're talking about stabilizers and you're talking about orbits, etc. Okay, then you can ask this question that what happens when the Mobius transformation starts on? Mobius transformations acts on the Riemann sphere. Okay, and what I was doing up to now is what a reformulation of what I was doing up to now with Mobius transformations and finding these invariant curves, etc., etc. That can be reformulated as what is the orbit of a point, okay, under various subgroups of the Mobius transformations. Okay, so you must begin to understand that these are connections or questions that you must be asking at every stage. As I said, as I say over and over again, mathematics is one subject, and you must learn how to ask questions related to some part that you have learned. You should ask the same questions in some other part, which may, and you'd be doing things in this other subject which may not be exactly what you're doing in the first subject. You may not, I mean, what I was talking about also was a group acting on a set, and I'm looking at orbits corresponding to certain subgroups, and then what do these orbits look like? Okay. The question, of course, will be what are the stabilizers and what are the orbits? Okay. And it's interesting to ask these questions, not just for the whole group, but also for subgroups. So please start thinking about these questions. Okay. I mean, what is going on in course number 1 and course number 2 and course number 3 are not watertight, separate compartments. Okay, they have very much to do with each other, and this happens in all the subjects of mathematics. So you must begin to look at it in a certain way. Okay, so the moral of the story is you should ask these questions also for when you're talking about categories. You should ask questions when you're talking about group actions. And of course, the point here you'll also understand is that these group actions, Mobius transformations, and this other thing I'll talk about, Blaschke products, these are infinite groups. And most of the time, you know, when you think about algebra or group theory, you know, when you're talking about group acting on a set, most of the time the set is going to be a finite set. Okay. And therefore, there's a distinction to be made. What happens in the finite set, what happens in the infinite case, etc. But the point is that these set of questions you should start thinking about, at least. Okay, this is one subject. Okay, so let's continue with what I was going to do today. And I don't know how it's going to go, but anyway. So just as you had that Mobius transformations, okay, this is some kind of a Mobius transformation of a particular kind, okay, and these maps are called Blaschke factors, and there is a infinite product expansion that whether we'll come to it or not, I don't know, but analytic functions of some kind have an infinite product expansion, and in the infinite product expansion, these Blaschke factors come in. So the exercise, this is an exercise which I hope Sagar and Kaushik will do sometime or the other, and if not, this is again something that you should look at yourself. So if mod z is less than 1, mod w is less than 1, you can define fw from d is a unit disk, mod z less than or equal to 1, by w minus z1 minus w bar z. And then if you fix your w with mod w less than 1, then mod fz is less than 1, okay, if mod z is also less than 1. And mod fz is equal to 1 only when either mod z is equal to 1 or mod w is equal to 1. F interchanges w and 0, mod fz is equal to 1 if mod z is equal to 1, and f is bijective, okay? And therefore, so the question is, my question is that can you do these things? Is there a group structure that is going on here for Blaschke products? So the exercise is, do these Blaschke, set of all Blaschke products, are they closed under composition? Okay. And again, do they act? What are orbits of these things? So why is Nikhil Bharti not getting admitted? He's waiting the ad. Anyway, we'll continue. Let's see if that continues with that. Okay. So do this is connect this with group actions and then you do the same thing as I said with Mobius transformations. Okay. How do you connect it with all that? This is another nice exercise with Mobius transformations that you have. What do I have on the left hand side? I have two parallel lines, say y equal to +1 and y equal to -1. And I have these circles centered, suppose you have circles center all the even integers of radius 1. Okay. So you have this kind of picture. And what you want to do is map this picture into this picture. Okay. And what is this picture? You have two circles. I've drawn it quite badly. But what you have are two circles which are tangent at one point. Okay, one is inside the other. And I have these circles, obviously, are the things that should be mapped to these circles. Okay. And these are infinitely many circles here in this parallel strip should be mapped to infinitely many circles which lie in this. It's not an annulus, it's not a ring. What is the name of this thing? Well, I suppose you can call it a ring. A ring at one side is thicker than the ring at the other end. Okay. So this is one exercise, and it's obvious that you have to do something with Mobius transformations. Why? Because Mobius transformations map straight lines and circles to straight lines and circles. Okay. So this exercise is actually an interesting exercise. Now this one more exercise I've put in here. This is a standard result that all of you must have proved sometime by now. Okay, e to the minus x squared. What is integral of e to the minus x squared from minus infinity to infinity? And it has something to do with the root pi, and the exercise is that this, so under change of variables, the exercise is that this is equal to 1. And this exercise, the next exercise is calculate the Fourier transform of e to the minus pi squared, pi x squared. Okay, so the Fourier, so here I've not written dx. It's integral minus infinity to infinity e to the minus x squared e to the minus 2 pi I x psi dx. Okay, that is my definition of the Fourier transform of e to the minus pi x squared. So this is the Fourier transform is f0 hat of psi, and my statement is that this is equal to f0 of psi, which is e to the minus pi psi squared. Okay, so this you will be able to do in a little while. You will see where. Okay, and you need a little bit of Cauchy's theorem for that. So we'll come to that very soon. Okay, and what this is saying is that the function f0 of x, which is e to the minus x squared, okay, is its own Fourier transform. The Fourier transform of f0, f0, the 0 is not written there, is its own Fourier transform. And the question is that, are there any other g's? And let me put it in some space. Are there any other g's which are maps from R to C, which are square integrable, which satisfy the property that the Fourier transform of G is itself? Okay. Has anyone thought about this? I'm not sure. Nikhil Bharti is still there. Okay. So this exercise is something for which you need Cauchy's theorem, which I'll come to just now. But anyway, so how many of you have proved that if f of x is equal to e to the minus pi x squared, the Fourier transform of f is f itself? Is this a familiar statement or not? No, people have not seen this. Has anyone seen this? Functions which are their own Fourier transform. First of all, do you understand that this is an important question? Okay. Fourier transform is important. And what we are saying is that 1 is an eigenvalue of the Fourier transform. It has eigenvector equal to e to the minus pi x squared. No? Am I saying something that none of you have heard before? So eventually we have to spend some time talking about the Fourier transform. We'll come back to this a bit later on. Okay. So let's see how it goes. So, and the way that one will prove this is that you integrate over contours. We'll come to this in a little while. Okay. And similarly, this is another important integral. That integral of 1 minus cos x over x squared is pi. And there's a similar thing for sine x. Okay. So what is a 1 minus sine x by x into something, sine x minus x squared into something. So there's a similar formula of this. And then of course, this is your standard thing. These problems are coming before the lecture, but anyway, that if you have any polynomial, then 1 over the polynomial is bounded on the complement of a large disk. Okay, so these problems you will come across in the So I better start with what people think is the basics of complex analysis, instead of just talking about SL2C and various things with SL2C. And I had better do this because if I don't, then Katre will shout at me. Is Katre present? I'm not sure. I hope he isn't. I should check. Give control, presenting. Who is this? Good. Katre is not there, so he doesn't know what I'm saying. So the point is that what I have been doing obviously is, I hope you understand that it is complex analysis, but in a proper complex, in a usual complex analysis course, not too much time is spent on SL2C. Okay. In fact, not much time is also spent on SL2Z, which is also important. Anyway, so omega is a region which is an open connect. So I'm going to go very fast over all this because I don't think there is any point in spending too much time proving most of these results, because the standard text that one is using is this book by Shakarchi and Stein, actually Stein and Shakarchi. It's a very good book. Okay. And it's one of the classics. And I hope you also know that Stein is one of the, very well-known names in analysis. So in mathematics. So the proofs are all given in that book. And I think it will be, and most of you by now would have seen the proofs of most of the statements I'm making already. And repeating the proofs in this class is not going to help very much. So what I'm doing now is some things that I'll be very quickly going over. Okay. So we say that F has a primitive in omega. Omega is an open connected set, subset of C. So F has a primitive, little f has a primitive if there exists a big F whose derivative is little f. Okay. So if big F is a derivative of little f, then integral of fz dz is the value of capital F, the difference in the values of capital F at the two endpoints. And then this just comes from fz is f prime z, which is f prime gamma t prime t dt, which is d by dt of f of gamma t, which is f of gamma 1 minus f of gamma 0. By the way, I think I had made a fuss about this also. The question, I think it's there in one of the first few problem sheets. The question is, so what I'm doing here is a change of variables formula in some sense, that this is equal to this. Okay, this is of course just the chain rule. And you're integrating this function and derivative of this function, so you get the difference of values at two endpoints. But the point here is that what is the formulation of the change of variables formula? I think I made a fuss about this here. I normally do. These are things that one should make a fuss about, because most students are extremely confused about the statement of the change of variables formula. Okay. And what I mean by the statement of the change of variables formula is that admit all is the change of variables formula on Rn. Okay. So I don't know whether I had said this earlier or not, but I hope all of you will try to understand, first of all, what is the change of variables formula for regions in Rn, number one. And if you are ambitious, you should also try and read the proof of the change of variables formula on Rn. Okay. So that requires a bit of work, and it is not something that you would normally have seen. And it's worthwhile trying to understand what this change of variables formula is. Okay. So anyway, that is just a by the way comment. Please try and read. First of all, please try and understand what the change of variables formulas for functions on Rn are. And then if you are ambitious, which I hope all of you are, please read the proof of the change of variables formula for open sets in Rn. Okay. I mean, this is again one of those things that usually is not taught in a class. It is just stated in some way or the other. And there are quite a few ideas involved in the proof of this change of variables formula. Okay, but anyway, that's by the way. Okay, so integral fz dz depends only on the endpoints of capital F. Okay, and in particular, if you have, so it depends only on the endpoints, and it does not depend on gamma. Okay, it does not depend on the path that joins the endpoints. So the integral of fz dz, f has a primitive. It depends only on the endpoints. Okay. In particular, gamma is a closed path. That means gamma 1 is equal to gamma 0. And if gamma 1 equal to gamma 0, then obviously this right hand side is 0. And therefore integral of fz dz is equal to 0. So what is this saying? This is saying that if little f has a primitive capital F, then integral of little f dz over gamma over any closed path gamma is equal to 0. Okay. And obviously this also tells you that if f prime of z is equal to 0, then f is constant. This follows immediately. Okay. Then there is this theorem called Goursat's theorem, which says that if you have a holomorphic function, okay, on some region, and T is any triangle, I have to be slightly careful of what I mean by integral over T of fz dz. You see, this integral dz is an integral over something that is a one-dimensional object. Whatever I mean by this one-dimensional thing. This T as it stands is supposed to be a triangle. Have I written this? I have not written this. Please add. On page 30, Goursat's theorem, T is supposed to be a triangle. I'm sorry. Okay. So T is supposed to be, capital T is supposed to be a triangle. I've drawn the triangle here, but I've not written it here. Okay. And you see the triangle, if you think about it, is a two-dimensional object. So what do I mean by integrating this function, okay, over this two-dimensional object? And actually what I mean is not the integral over the triangle. What I mean is integral over the boundary of the triangle. So this is bad notation, but it's sort of standard notation also. So someone is still waiting. Someone has been admitted. Okay, so integral, what I want is that if you have f is holomorphic in that region, okay, then integral over the boundary of the triangle of fz dz is 0. Okay. No one is waiting. Why am I getting that message? So the proof is a standard proof, and the proof says that you take the integral of the triangle, break this triangle up into 4 subtriangles in the most natural way. And the way you break it up is by taking the midpoints of the edges and joining those midpoints, so you get a triangle inside, and that triangle is smaller, and integral of the boundary of the whole thing is the integral over the boundaries of, so you have some integral, you have a directions of the boundary, okay, and therefore they induce directions on the sides inside, okay. So I have these arrows outside are the arrows in which gamma is the boundary of T is going around, and you have consistent ways of drawing the arrows inside. So each of these things will be a triangle with the arrows there. You know, this actually is, I hope you understand that there's something that is going on here, which is very special to a two-dimensional object. You know, I can do this in 2 dimensions. If you have 3 dimensions, what do you mean by drawing these arrows? Okay, or how will you draw these arrows? And what would you mean by joining midpoints of the surfaces that you have there? So this is special to 2 dimensions. Okay, the question you should ask is there something like this in 3 dimensions? And therefore, when you take the sum of the boundary of the big triangle, it is sum of the boundaries of the smaller triangles, and therefore one of the smaller triangles is going to have the maximum contribution. Okay, and therefore integral of the big triangle is less than or equal to, choose that one for which it has the integral mod f dz over the smaller triangle, boundary of the smaller triangles, is the largest. If it's the largest, then you'll have 1. Okay. So this is less than or equal to, this is the largest, so this is less than 4 times this. And you continue in this manner, and you take the intersection of these things. And this is what I hope this will be the diameter of the triangle after the first construction. The diameter becomes half the diameter of the previous triangle. Okay, at the third stage, the diameter will be less than 1 by 2 to the 3, or 3 minus 1, or whatever it is. The diameter of these triangles you're choosing goes smaller and smaller, and therefore the intersection, these are closed sets, compact sets, whose diameter goes down to 0, and therefore the intersection consists of a single point, and you start playing around with that point. Okay. So if the integral is non-zero, you'll get a contradiction. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this proof. You please read up this proof. All of you have seen this proof earlier. Okay. And therefore you'll get the corollary, or actually a theorem, which says that if you have a holomorphic function for a region which is of a special kind, namely, you have a holomorphic function defined on the disk. Now, I have to be slightly careful about open disk, closed disk, and whatever. So when I'm not specifying it, it means D is an open disk. And if F is holomorphic on the open disk, then F has a primitive. That means I can find a capital F, so that capital F prime is equal to little f. Okay. How? So I'm just telling you a formula for capital F. Capital F is equal to integral over the path gamma of fz dz, because little f is given to you. You want to find the capital F. Okay. So I'm just saying it's the integral of gamma of fz dz, where what is gamma? The gamma is this curve. Okay, I assume that my disk is ball center 0, radius 1, which I can do. For a general thing, you should be able to write it down as it is. And gamma is the thing which goes horizontally to the same x coordinate as z, and then go vertically from that. If z is x plus iy, gamma consists of the 2 line segments, horizontal line segment from 0 to x, okay, and the vertical line segment from from x0 to xy. So I'm giving you explicitly what y is. I define f to be this, and then it is very easy to show that capital F prime of z is equal to little f. This again, it boils down to saying what? It boils down to saying that if you have a continuous function, okay, and you take the integral of a continuous function on R or an interval, then the derivative of the integral of a continuous function is that function f, little f, that is. D by dx of integral 0 to x of ft dt is f of x. That is all that I'm saying here. Okay. So please verify this. And then if this shows that if f is holomorphic on D, okay, then it has a primitive. And if it has a primitive, then the integral over any closed path of little f z dz is 0. That is what I just had earlier. Okay. And therefore, you will get Cauchy's integral formula from the statement that if you have a region omega and z is in omega, the closure of the disk is contained in interior of omega. You see, now I have to be slightly worried about how is the disk sitting inside omega. Okay. I want not just D, the disk, to be sitting inside omega, but I want the closure of the disk to be sitting inside the open set omega. There are some problems here about the boundary. What you will understand is that there are problems here about the boundary. Okay, so I want to avoid all these problems. So I'm saying that the closure of D is contained in the interior of omega. Of course, omega is open. So I can just say that closure of D is contained in omega. Okay, you take the boundary of D. Maybe I should make a fuss here about the notion of boundary also. The boundary of D is a circle with some positive orientation. Then fz is equal to 1 over. So see, I've made a mistake here. It's not a mistake, but I should write it in this way. F of z is equal to f of zeta d zeta over zeta minus z integral over gamma, where gamma is the curve, is a circle, okay, which is the boundary of D, taken with the positive orientation. I had made a fuss about this orientation business earlier also. Okay. So that orientation is fixed. What do I wanted to say something here? What did I want to say here? Something. This notion of boundary. Yeah. You know, the word boundary is used in many different ways. Okay. And the ways that you use it, it is used is not the same. Okay. Now, you should be learning about boundary in your topology class. Okay. You will also be learning about boundary in a class which tells you about Stokes theorem. Okay. Then if you have a manifold in Rn, there is a notion of the boundary of a manifold. Okay. Then there are boundaries and co-boundaries that one talks about in homological algebra. Okay. So it's actually an interesting exercise to take this word, in fact, to take any word in mathematics, but boundary is a good example. It's an interesting exercise to take the word boundary, okay, and try to list all the different contexts in the way that the word boundary is used. Okay. So in mathematics, of course, it's also used in so-called real life in another manner. For example, in cricket, what is the boundary? Okay. He has hit a boundary. Anyway, so the point is that the word boundary in mathematics is used in many different ways. And it is quite instructive to make a list of all the very many different ways in which one uses the word boundary. Okay. So, I mean, this is just a by the way remark, but in this particular case, the word boundary is used in the same way that you have boundary of a set. Okay. In topology. But you must realize that the word is used in many different ways. Okay. How does the proof of this go? Cauchy's integral formula fz is equal to this. You take a particular region. This is Stein calls this a keyhole region. Okay. Why? Because it looks like a keyhole. You can shove in the key in that hole. Though of course nowadays keyholes have stopped looking like that. Keyholes have also become electronic. Okay. But this is, so to say, a classic keyhole. And what you do is integrate this particular function over this region and let the epsilon and the delta tend to 0. Okay, this height between the two parallel things is a delta, and the circle that you have inside circle there is a circle of radius epsilon, and you let these two things tend to 0, and then you will get that the integral is 0. Okay, of f zeta over that region is 0. Because f is analytic in an open set which contains that region. And then when you write this out and let the limit tend to 0, you will get this particular result. Okay. So Cauchy's integral formula basically follows from the fact that integral of an analytic function over a closed contour is 0. And then of course everything follows from this, that you can take derivatives, and when you take derivatives you get n plus 1 here. Okay, for all z. If f is holomorphic, then f is infinitely differentiable as a complex function. And if gamma is a circle, then the nth derivative is given by n factorial times this. Okay. And the proof, so the proof here also I should say something here. The proof is by induction on n, and it says that z is far away from the circle C. You take z, which is far away from the circle C, and you take the point H, so that z plus H is close to z. I should be slightly more careful here. This is not the point H, but this is the point z plus H. That segment is H, from z to z plus H. Okay. So what is the statement that one is making? What does this follow from? It follows from the fact that if z is far away from the boundary C, and H or z plus H is small, that means z is very close to z plus H. Let me say this again. If z is very far from the boundary, if z is at a large distance from the boundary of C, and z plus H is close to z, okay, then z plus H is also quite far from C. What am I saying? If z is far away from C and H is small, then z plus H is also far away from C. Does this make sense?
Yes, sir.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
How do you prove it? First of all, what is the correct statement? Can you formulate the correct mathematical statement about what I have just written down?
Yeah, if distance between Z and C is less than epsilon, and
That's wrong.
Yeah, distance between C is some fixed point, fixed number, and
That's also wrong. Okay, anyway, continue. Okay.
and yeah, and then Z is very small number. Means
That's wrong. Z is not small. It is H that is small. I have made some statement which is intuitively obvious. My question is, how do you make that mathematically precise? I wanted to say something here. Let me see if I can say it or not.
so what do you mean by far? Means how much far?
That is what I want you to, that's what I want you to make precise. What do I mean by far? What do I mean by close? How is that related to whatever? So this person is not there. There's supposed to be a person from Manipur in this class, but I can't see that name here anywhere. Okay. So my statement is that if Delhi is 5,000 kilometers from Hanoi and Thaubal, this person from Manipur is from Thaubal, if you haven't heard it. Okay. So if Delhi is more than 4,000 miles from 4,000 kilometers from Hanoi, and Thaubal is within 2,000 kilometers of Delhi, then Thaubal is at least what?
Yeah, at least 4,000 miles from the
No, it's not 4,000. What should I say?
less than 4,000. Yeah, more than 4,000 miles from.
No, that's wrong. you understand that this is actually an idea that people do find this difficult. Once you understand what's going on, it's very straightforward. The question is, what is greater than, what is less than, and then if this is that, then that is greater than that, then is this less than that, or is that less than this? Okay. So if you're in Pune, so where are people from? I think there was someone from Tamil Nadu, I believe, somewhere in Tamil Nadu. Yes. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. Okay, in Pune, you take Pune and Bombay and Pune and Mumbai, and Thane is very close to Mumbai. Okay. And then I want to make the statement that if Pune is 100 kilometers from Bombay and if Pune is more than 100 kilometers from Bombay and Thane is at most 5 kilometers from Bombay, then Thane is, what should I say, from Pune?
At least 105 kilometers.
That's wrong. There are two possible answers. One answer is 105 and the other is 95. Which one is correct?
Less than 95.
That's also wrong. These are things at least
95.
Do you understand that is the right answer?
Yeah.
So because Pune is far away from Bombay and Thane is close to Bombay, that says that Thane is at least so much far away from Pune. Yes? And do you understand that is what I need here? That is what I need here. If Z is far away from C and H is small, then Z plus H is also far away from C. It may not be as far away as Z is, but it is at least far away from C. Okay? So your C is Pune and Bombay and Thane or whatever you like. Okay? Delhi and Hanoi and Thoubal. Okay? By the way, is that person from Thoubal present? I didn't see the name there, but there is a person from Thoubal. And if the rest of you do not know where Thoubal is, Thoubal, please go into Google Maps and find out where it is. Okay. So the point is, this is the fact that is needed, and there's this geometric fact that is needed. And please make this precise, what I'm trying to tell you. And I mean, again, all of you have seen this proof, but probably not enough of a fuss has been made to try and understand this far away and close to and at least so far away. This is the crux of that issue. Okay, so try to understand what it means by saying that. Nearly time. Yes, it's nearly time. So therefore, you will get that if f is holomorphic, then the nth derivative is less than this, where f gamma is a supremum, because you have these formula. Okay, if f is bounded by something, fn is less than or equal to your zeta for every z. Okay, you take z in the interior of gamma and you'll get this kind of quantity. Okay, so you get these estimates. There's a name for these estimates, that the nth derivative is less than or equal to the maximum of f over r to the n, where z is this and z naught is there. And therefore, if f is bounded everywhere, this is a bounded function. Okay, and the first derivative, n is fixed. Okay, n equal to 1. The first derivative is bounded by this f, maximum of f divided by r, n equal to 1. Let r tend to infinity, and therefore if the function is constant, then the derivative is 0, and therefore f is constant. And similarly, you will get the corresponding, maybe I should stop here, I'll start from here. You get the fundamental theorem of algebra. If you have a non-constant polynomial, then it has a root. Okay, and therefore every polynomial Pz factorizes over Z. By the way, this is another sort of one of those things that I hope you will make a list of. Namely, this is one proof of the fundamental theorem of algebra. Okay, the fundamental theorem of algebra has many different proofs, all of which seem to be quite distinct from each other. So I hope at some point of time in your lives, you will try to make a list of all the different ways in which the fundamental theorem of algebra is proved. I believe there are some 15 different methods of proving this, if not more. Okay, and they are very distinct from each other. Okay, so it is worthwhile to sort of try to understand what these different proofs are. So yeah, maybe I should stop here. So fundamental theorem of algebra is also a consequence of Cauchy's integral formula, the derivatives of Cauchy's integral formula. Okay, it's a consequence of Liouville's theorem. If it's bounded, a bounded analytic function is constant. So I should stop here. And someone is coming at this time. Anyway, so I should stop here, and as usual, questions you must have. This is another exercise I should have written there, that what is this business about close and far and at least so much and whatever. Make that into a precise mathematical statement. Okay. And as you can see, a lot of you have difficulty with this statement. and you will understand that it is so elementary, so basic properties about distances, okay, Euclidean distances or any distance. So, and this property actually is used quite often in different contexts, okay? So I hope there are a couple of things I'm asking you to do this time, which I've not written there. One is give a list of the proofs of the fundamental theorem of algebra. The other is do this business about close and near and far, and something is far. And what was the third one? There was something else I had also suggested that you do. There was a third one. What was the third one? Do I remember? There was a third thing that I wanted you to think about. The change of variables formula. Okay. So each of these three things actually will take you some time. To understand the change of variables formula and to read this change of variables formula is important. To actually see the proof takes quite a bit of understanding, but it is also rewarding. The change of variables formula, this business about distances, etc., is something that is straightforward, but you must understand that there is something to be understood. Then I've told you something about boundaries. Okay, make a list of all the ways, all the different contexts, or all the different methods in which the word boundary is used in mathematics. Okay, and now make a list of all the different ways of proving the fundamental theorem of algebra. Every polynomial over C has a root in C. Okay, and making these lists or trying to find out about these lists are going to be useful to you. Okay, I think I've got through with my time. I'm already 1 minute over time, so I should stop here.